You're listening to WKDW Radio 97.5 and KDWRadio.com, broadcasting from Northport, Florida. And I hope you're going to enjoy this pre-recorded show. I've got a very special guest in the house, and I'm actually going to let her introduce herself and give a little background. Sandra, go ahead.
Hi, well, thank you so much for having me on today. It is so great to be here. My name is Sandra Tapfumaneyi. I'm the new Chief of Emergency Management for Sarasota County, and I have been here since January 2nd and working really hard with the team here that's been in place and doing a great job in Sarasota County, working with all of our municipalities and regional and state partners. I come from Lee County. I was the Chief of Emergency Management down there for the last couple of years, and with the team as the operations chief before that. So I was down in Lee County for 11 years before coming up here. And I started my emergency management career working as a contractor to the Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta, where we helped the CDC with running all of their internal emergency management programs. So it's great to be here in Sarasota. It has been a wonderful transition. The residents and the staff, all the partners have been very welcoming.
Well, I'm going to stick with the Lee County for a second because you've gotten your fair share of experience with hurricanes down in Lee County. Not that we haven't here, but how do you think that's going to enhance your future in the emergency services field? Because I got to tell you, you got quite the backlog of information there that you can count on.
Yeah. Yeah. So, in emergency management, we spend a lot of time planning, right, and preparing and training. And, Southwest Florida is one of those areas in the country where we fortunately, have the opportunity to practice a lot of what we do. We were faced with many hurricanes down in Lee County, not only Hurricane Ian in 2022, but Hurricane Irma in 2017 was a major event for us down there as well. And it's not just all about, we're talking about hurricanes today, but, all hazards, right? So we have had a number of other events. I've had an EF2 tornado that occurred just a few months before Ian. You take as an emergency manager all of these experiences. And in the state of Florida, we have a very strong network of emergency management partnerships. So I've also deployed to Hurricane Idalia in Madison County last year. And then years ago, after Hurricane Irma 2018, in the Bay County area, I deployed for Hurricane Michael for that Category 5 storm. Honestly, all of those experiences help to frame your perspective and gives you a good, unique understanding of these storms and how to respond to them.
So coming into the Sarasota County area and then the networking that you have to do here, which I'm sure is already underway,
right.
And your experiences that you had just from Ian, and we've all kind of lived through this. What changes or what assessment have you made in your new position here that are changing now?
Yeah, that's a great question, John. Being new to any program, it is an assessment at first, right? You want to understand what is working well, what can we enhance? And one of the reasons that Sarasota County reached out to really ask me to consider applying for this position is that they understood that I had that catastrophic lens, right? I understood what things need to be put in place. And so that's really what I've been working with the teams up here to look at, okay, so we have a great program in place. How can we enhance that so that if we are that landfall for a storm like Ian in the future, do we have things in place like enough pre-disaster contracts, for example? Local government is not in a position to be able to do everything itself for those large scale events. So we've been looking a lot at what extra contracts do we need in place to get the private sector involved. nonprofit agencies. Where are we with our relationship building and our ability to not only do volunteer coordination but also donations was a huge thing during Ian. And how does that look here in Sarasota? We've done a lot of work on just evaluating who comes to the Emergency Operations Center. Do we have all the right partners that are coming? How do we build up our regional? We have a very strong regional relationship with all of the regional counties as well. So we're diving into, do we have the right people? Do we have the right equipment and resources? How are we doing with communicating to the public? Are we reaching everybody that needs to get the messaging? Because the one thing that we really learned from Ian is that people did not understand the risk of that storm. And so working very closely with groups like the National Hurricane Center and being able to give them input to make changes like their new cone that they're putting out this year. So we want to make sure that everyone is getting that information so that if we have something that's affecting us, that they understand what it means when we tell them you need to evacuate, and they understand why we're telling them that they need to evacuate. So that all of that has been kind of this first couple of months diving into all those areas.
Yeah, and I remember the interview with two ladies that were at Hooters pre-Ian, and who said, we're going to hunker down. We've been here for all the storms. Well,
yeah.
I hate to say this, but I've never seen an interview with them since, or a follow-up. So I think they stayed, and I think we all know what happened with Hooters, along with just the beach itself in Fort Myers. So your background there, while heavy in experience, it's traumatic too, because you're dealing with all these other facets that are out of your control, such as people staying behind, not being prepared. And I've worked in the shelters myself. I went to Northport High School during Irma, and people's preparedness for going to a shelter is almost unbelievably poor, because they're under the impression that the shelter will provide you everything.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about that and maybe the preparedness of that? Because we're approaching season.
Yeah, that's a great question. Because I think you're right. They see pictures maybe or videos of what they envision a shelter looking like, and then they show up. And sometimes that's people decide at the last minute to go. So some of that is because they're not thinking ahead really what their plan should be. So we really want people to think through. And these and in Sarasota County, we call the shelters evacuation centers. So what we want people to do is, hey, really think through now. If you live in a level A or a level B or a level C, zone evacuation level, this is the time of year to think through where would I go? And we tell people those evacuation centers will be open, but you're going to be way more comfortable if you can find a family member or a friend who just lives outside of that evacuation area to go there. But they're open and they're available. So if people need to go, we do want them to think through the fact that for our general population evacuation centers, that there are no cots available there. So they need to bring things to sleep on. They need to bring, we do have food and water that we provide, but if you have special dietary needs or you just like certain foods, right, that would be really important to bring those, your medications, things to do. It's very likely that, especially as a storm passes, we might lose power. So your phone may die, your children's iPads and their gaming devices might go. So bring things for them to do, bring things for you to do, and kind of think through those. If you have extra charging, the extenders that will extend the life of your battery, for example, that's a great thing to bring to shelters. But really, we ask people to bring their patience. This is a very trying time for people, and everyone is on edge, and people are doing the best that they can. In Sarasota County, the bulk of the staffing is handled by our county employees. So these are people who are being asked, who are normally a librarian or they work for human resources. and they're asked to come in to staff those shelters. So just bring your patients. And the last thing I want to touch on with the evacuation centers is we do have what's called medically dependent shelters. And what that means is if somebody has a special medical need, or they're on oxygen or dependent on electricity for their medical supplies, they can apply now for that program. We work with the Department of Health to evaluate who has a spot in those centers. So if they go to our website, scgov.net, they can put an application in, and we'll evaluate that and potentially give them a spot. But essentially, we don't want any barriers for people to get to an evacuation center if they need to. So we also have a program. If you need a ride, you can apply for us to come and pick you up. We have rally points across the county. And also all of our centers are pet friendly. So again, we just don't want to have any limitations.
And I can attest to that. My wife will, if she was here, would tell you she took care of more animals during Irma than I thought she even imagined that would come to a shelter. So people do bring all of their pets, every single one of them. So you have to adapt. And the people that are volunteering at the shelter, I have to give them kudos, because they're keeping their cool. They're keeping everything kind of rooted where it needs to be. And that's processing people, getting them into the safe zones and quickly, so that the lines aren't terribly long outside. So they do a great job at that. And I think that's one of the, I think that's one of the things that, because we've been so frequently through these, I think even the shelter routine now has sharpened its point a little bit, and it's gotten better.
It has. And we every year we work in the school district. We have to mention the school district, because they're such a huge partner with us. All of our evacuation centers are school facilities, so they also provide staff and help us with that. But we work with them, in constant communication with the school district on that shelter program. And so every year, we're doing trainings, we're doing meetings where those shelter teams that we talked about are getting together, so they're very comfortable working with one another. So that's our hope, John, that the community sees that while this is a well-run machine. That being said, it's a disaster as well. Where you're in a disaster situation, right? So again, that's where it gets back to, hey, if things aren't running perfectly, they're doing the very best that they can. And again, the other important point too is, if we are in a situation where we need to open additional centers after landfall, we can always do that as well. So maybe somebody hasn't gone, before their home was impacted, they have nowhere to go, that'll be something else that we'll be working on here from the Emergency Operations Center.
Well, and perfect evidence of that is the flooding we had, because it was during that event, but it came for days after, and it changed people's whole perception of a storm, because we went from, oh, I'm good from Ian, but I'm really not good from Ian, because she left tons of water for me to deal with.
Yes.
And we're as a city, I know that I've talked with our public works department, had them on. We're going through our canals. We're, 80 miles of canals is a lot to endure as far as clearing waterways and having the depth to take on that kind of water. I don't know that we could dig a hole deep enough to take on that load with high tide, different things like that. So those are all the things that you guys, even with the city, you guys are partnering with the city in those scenarios, right? And get
absolutely.
information from the city to strategize on the best routes to take, right?
Yeah, we work very closely with Northport, as we do with all of our municipalities. They're great partners. They have a very strong program under the direction of Stacey Alosio there. And here's the challenge, John. We can do the best that we can with, like you said, clearing canals and making sure that the ditches are clutter free, so that the water is going to flow the way that it's supposed to. But at the end of the day, we live on a very, very flat area of the country, right? Very low elevation. And everyone moves to Florida. Why do they move to Florida? Because they want to be near the ocean, right? Which is wonderful most times of the year. But when you have a storm approaching that has the potential to push the storm surge, that abnormal rise of water onto the land, the Gulf of Mexico is very shallow. We don't have much of a continental coast or continental shelf that can help protect us from that storm surge. It is just one of the hazards that we need to be realistic about, here in Sarasota County. So people need to understand that. And back to your original point that, hey, look, that storm might be different the next time. You might have lived here in Sarasota County for 30 years and have never seen that flooding, event. And so that's why it's so important for people to, first of all, yes, do what you can to protect your house and protect yourself and get a plan in place. But if we are issuing an evacuation for your neighborhood, the reason we are doing that is because we are getting information from the National Hurricane Center that's telling us that they're forecasting that there could be storm surge, in your driveway, in your home, right? So that's why we need you to move. And it's hard, right? Because we like to be, we're creatures, comfort, we like to do what we've done in the past because it's worked for us. And unfortunately, these storms are so unpredictable that, they're going to change. Each one's going to be different.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because the best we can do as citizens is first and foremost make that decision of where we're going to go and stay there, unless we need to move, but also thinking of the strategy for us being very flexible too. During Charlie, my plan was to head in towards Arcadia in my RV, because they said go inland. Well, I'm glad that I had the foresight to go, no, I'm going to stay right where I'm at. I'm not going to leave this house. And I lived off of Hillsborough towards Port Charlotte. So I was actually closer than I normally had been to Charlie entrance. But I made the decision to not drive my RV to Arcadia. I don't even know if I'd be here if I did that. But those are the decisions that people have to make. And sometimes cooler heads prevail when you hear that little voice in the back of your head going, maybe not. Maybe a block home is better than an RV and 6 wheels.
So, 100%, especially if that home is outside of the evacuation area, right? So we never want residents to stay if they're inside an evacuation, or they're under an evacuation order. But that's a great point. So if you're in a home that is outside of that area, especially if you have a home that was built anywhere, 2002 and newer, for sure, you should be fine to withstand the winds. It's that storm surge that we're so concerned about. But certainly we would never want anyone to be in an RV, a mobile or manufactured home. Those are just not safe structures. You're better off being in a more secure building, whether that's a home or you go to an evacuation center. But the most important thing is just to really understand, hey, am I in an area that is dangerous for me to stay? And if you have any questions about that and you're a little confused about what the answer to that question is, you can always call 311 during a storm. We have our county staff here answering those phone calls. We'll have information posted on our website, of course, and social media and the media. You guys, will be, I'm sure, sharing that information too. But sometimes it's a little confusing. Like, what does that mean for me right here in this house, right? What do I need to do? So we don't want anyone to be confused about that.
Well, the nice thing that we've done at WKDW, because we're a community radio station, we've actually, and I'm trying to get this information out. This is the perfect time to do it. But we've actually partnered with the city of Northport in their emergency broadcasting capability. So they literally have, with a push of a button on their tablet, they interrupt our broadcasting, and they have the live mic at 97.5 FM. So our citizens, if you're listening now or in the future, can share this information with your fellow citizens. 97.5 FM is going to be the voice of Northport emergency broadcasting for the city of Northport. This is really going to be a cool thing. And we've partnered with them on that. And as long as we have internet and the capabilities of broadcasting, they have that at their fingertip, which is really cool.
That's great. And it's good to get that information out now, so that if people lose connection or, they don't have their cell phones, they know to jump on the radio to get to that. Yeah.
So I'm gonna slide back for a second and talk about the contracts that you said you were kind of looking at. Have we enhanced that now, that portfolio of what we can pull in as far as resources?
Yeah, so some we have currently in place and have worked on over the last couple of months, and others we are out to bid for some additional ones, and we're in the process of vetting applicants. And so some examples are shelter staffing. So we're trying to augment the ability to get a vendor to come in to assist the county staff and the school district staff to staff at these evacuation centers. And that way, if we are hit and employees have to go back to check on their homes, we still have a solid group in place from a vendor to be able to staff those locations. We're also looking at transportation vendor, so somebody that can help us move equipment. Right now, when we need to have food and water, for example, or cots brought to a shelter, that's a mix of our staff here at the county general services assists us with that. But then also the All Faiths Food Bank as a tremendous partner. They bring out, food and water for us. They're wonderful. But what happens if we need more help, right? So instead of scrambling to look for that help, we want to make sure that we've got, somebody in place to help us with that. And so the other thing we're looking at too is coming up with formalized agreements for use of premise. So for example, during Ian in Lee County, we had nearly every square inch of the county was taken up by some entity who was there to help us. But they all need a place to set up their tents and set up their equipment. And so we're looking at creating this map of Sarasota County and the areas that we already have pre-designated. For example, FPL, coming in, they already have a spot, but there's some entities that are looking for a space. So that also you need use of premise agreements if it's a private entity that you are using their property. So those are just a couple. We've got a number of them that we're digging into. And one more that I think is important too is the augmentation of staffing. So when you're in a long-term event, Ian, we were activated for 6 months, and that wears on your staffing. People need a break. So having a plan in place to bring in a contractor to assist with additional emergency managers, we have that opportunity to do that through the state and through the Florida Emergency Preparedness Association. But it's always nice to have extra options if we need to bring in a vendor to assist.
I'm glad you brought staffing in because I just did an interview with Chief and Deputy Chief of Police here in Northport. They brought into the fold that what happens inside their building during Ian or a scenario like that where they pull the staff in. So we're in need here of another police department for a lot of different reasons. We're 104 square miles, so we're growing leaps and bounds. But at the same time, these crisis centers, I want to call them crisis centers because you don't know whether it's going to be an Ian or a different type of emergency that we have here. They're utilized. These buildings are utilized for a lot of different reasons, but they also pool their resources into one building a lot of times, and that's what they explained to us, which I don't think the citizens really realize unless they've been to a shelter and understood that whole thing, like personally. You can watch it on video and say, yeah, I understand it, until you actually go there and spend 4 to 5 days and endure that. Because you do lose a lot of controls that you have normally at home. You don't have the freedoms of opening the doors and walking outside in the middle of a storm and looking at things. You have to protect the roof, and you can't compromise things like that. But all of that being said, the staff, how are we dealing with that for the future? Because I know it's a grind. Are we bringing in different resources?
Yeah. So, again, we do a lot here with our core staff that we would activate, in order to lead the efforts here at the Operations Center for the county. And we make sure that, we do have these, we are subscribers of and signatories of the statewide mutual aid agreement. So every entity, public entity, who works in emergencies across the state has the option to sign that SMAA. And that agreement allows us to make a phone call or put in a request to the state of Florida's Emergency Management Center and ask for teams to come in. So whether that is additional strike teams of ambulances, or we need dispatchers to come in to augment our 911 center, or we need staffing at our emergency operations center, or we have, let's say we've got points of distribution or comfort stations or things that are happening in the field that we don't do day to day on a normal basis. So all of those things, we can ask for extra teams to come in. Also, the Florida Emergency Preparedness Association, or FEPA, they have a similar program in place where we can ask specifically for emergency managers and people who are members of that association to come in as well. And it's not just Florida. So if the state doesn't have enough teams available, they can then go to outside of the state. And there's a emergency management agreement with all of the states in the country. So they can pull from all these different states. So the nice thing is that, we have a lot of people that are ready and willing to help if we need it. People just need to understand that they just need to ask for that assistance. And then also what we learned in Ian is that you also need a process in place. It's great if everybody wants to come and help, but are you organized enough to be able to say, okay, hey teams, this is what I need you to do and you to do. And you have to coordinate that process. It's not enough just to ask them to come in. So that's one of the things that we're working on here in Sarasota County, really building that structure and understanding, how we would weave them into our local process so that we can use them to the best abilities and to make it an efficient process.
Awesome. So we've been talking a lot locally about an EOC being part of Northport. Can you talk a little bit about an EOC and what an EOC is for those who don't?
Absolutely. So an emergency operations center it is really your hub of where, everybody that needs to be a part of that response is going to come and be face-to-face. And some of the main things that happen at those centers are, big decisions are being made, like evacuations. We are communicating to the public with one voice, and that's really important. Our public information team here does an excellent job with coordinating with all of the public information officers across the county. It would be very confusing if you were getting different information from each of these agencies, right? So we want to speak with one voice. And then we're also sharing information. What we call that a common operating picture. We want to make sure that people who are here making those decisions have an understanding of what is going on. So a lot of what we're doing is getting information from the field, from damage assessment teams, from municipalities, from whoever has that information to help us paint that picture of how have we been impacted and where are the areas that we need to provide resources first. So resources can be scarce after a disaster. So the Emergency Operations Center is there to evaluate all of that and then get those resources and coordinate that delivery, making sure we're tracking those resources, and then demobilizing, right? Because this is also expensive, right? So we want to be very cautious that we are only using things that we need, and that we are demobilizing is a fancy word that just says we're going to, shut down and send back, those resources. Right. That's really what that operations center does. And without an operations center in a community, you have a bunch of people maybe trying to do that on their own in silos. And that's where that can get very complicated, and you have redundancies and you have people trying to do the same thing on a parallel effort. And you're not really utilizing your resources to the best of your ability. And there's a lot of inefficiencies. So really, it's a huge value to the community to have an operations center that is managing all of these things.
Are you working with the city now to build an operations center here in Northport?
Yeah, so we are coordinating with the city as far as the county is not necessarily building the center for the city, but we are in support of them having an EOC. Because truly it helps us when the municipalities can organize the same way that I just described and be able to give us clear information. They know what's going on in the city and can give clear assessments. And that operations center is really helpful for them to be able to organize themselves. So we would be in full support, of them having one, just because it is a little bit challenging if you're trying to do all of that work out of a conference room or, something that isn't set up. Typically in EOCs, you've got a lot of technology. You have the ability to have conferencing capabilities and all the, things that you need in order to communicate during responses.
So assessing us here in Northport, That is a good focal point for us, is to get an EOC built, correct?
It would, it would be helpful as an emergency manager. That's one of our biggest tools that we have this, facility to operate out of.
All right, so I love that, because a lot of people don't realize uh, what happens, one, during an event, uh, two, the EOC itself, uh, the command center, I guess you would say, of everything in the local market. I think we could have used that huge here, even though we adapted. Um, the word adapting to what you have, it's perfect if, as long as you can work within that restraint. But we already have a building that, one, is too small as far as the police department, and having an EOC, additional EOC built here, I know that they're talking about. So I actually hope they make the move and get that project underway. We already found out that we can be hit with different levels, whether it be just storm surge in certain areas, or just flooding from the rains that come with these storms. And you never know what's gonna come. The storms are unpredictable at best,
Absolutely.
and people just need to be prepared, and the city needs to be prepared. And the beautiful thing here is we have a partner at the county level, and the way you described the hands that are wrapped around an emergency event outside of our county, including the state. I remember seeing the ambulances, and when you started talking about the services outside of our market, I remember watching the ambulances head through our county to go to Lee.
Mm-hmm.
And I that was evidence to me that the system was actually working the correct way, because they were on the spot. They were on their way. They weren't, there was no delay in that reaction time. And that's truly what your job is all about, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what we're doing. We're assessing what needs we're going to have. We try to predict that ahead of time. And then we try to put those resource requests in with enough time for them to get here, so that we can utilize them as soon as we need to, when that landfall is done and it's safe, to go out and actually respond. And
So
John, I think we have time for like one more question. I'm so sorry, but we have time for maybe about one more question.
All right. So I'm kind of going to put two together, because I prepped you just with the two beforehand.
Okay.
The changes in what we've learned for getting supplies and resources into the Northport area from the flooding, we kind of learned strategically from that, and follow up with that was the Lamarck Elementary School and the special needs side. Can you kind of address both of those?
Yeah, sure. So during Ian, we had a number of resource requests that came through the Emergency Operations Center here for numerous different things in the field. And so, we were working very closely with the municipalities to understand, again, what we've been talking about, where are the areas that are hardest hit, and where do we need to put things like points of distribution and resources for the community. So the EOC here, what we do is we put those requests in if it was something that we didn't have here locally, and it got sent up to the state of Florida. So, Ian was a massive event, not only, here in Sarasota, but across Southwest Florida. And it did highlight, there's always challenges with communication and making sure that we're giving very clear communication to the state so that they understand, where our areas are the hardest hit, where resources need to go first. And so that was one of the things that we're going to be doing, moving forward, is continuing to work with the state, especially when we ask for resources that we might not have here locally. We want to make sure that they get to the hardest areas that are hit first. And we're doing everything that we can here at the local level to understand from our municipalities, what do they need, and how we can help them, with getting those resources. So we're going to continue to build on that communication and coordination locally here as well with the state. And then, for Lamarck, our medically dependent sheltering, it's a very complicated and challenging operation. So again, this is a evacuation center set up by the Department of Health and managed by the Department of Health. We support that at the county level, as does the school district, with some staffing and some other resources. And so, we're in a shelter deficit here in Southwest Florida, mainly because we have these really large evacuation levels. And, we try to do the best that we can to put shelters outside of any of the hazards that might be affected, and be coming with a storm. So, we know that we have some challenges with the number of buildings that we are currently using for sheltering. We need more spaces. So we're continuously looking and coordinating with the school district as they build new schools. There is a requirement, if the school is outside of an evacuation level A, B, or C, that school be built to a code, which is an enhanced hurricane protection area code. So essentially that just increases the structure and allows us to use it as a shelter. So we are in communication with the school district every time they build a new school. We are talking to them about whether or not that new building meets the requirements. And if it does, then we are working with them closely to make sure that we can utilize it as an evacuation center. So we're hopeful. Our end goal is to have a larger facility, one building that we might be able to use that's newer, that we can use for our medically dependent shelter. And as the population of Sarasota grows, I can guarantee you there's going to be more schools that are built. And really, one of the nice things about the fact that that population is starting to, as the saturation along the coastline, it's starting to drift east, right? And that's really where we want these schools built, because that helps us, for the evacuation centers. The further from the coastline, the more likely that that's going to be a spot that we'll be able to use, and it'll be a safe, place for us to be able to utilize.
One last thing, and it's going to be simple for you. Mm-hmm. Give your contact information and what number people should call to find out more information.
Sure, absolutely. Well, we have this wonderful call center, the 311 call center here at the county. So if anybody needs any information from emergency management, we do have these brand new emergency, I got a guide right here. I can show you these emergency preparedness guides that we're going to have out at libraries and parks and rec facilities and out at the municipalities. So we would love to get these in the hands of individuals. But if you have any questions for us, just call 311 and they'll route that to our team.
And that's available. Didn't I see that was available online too?
Yes, we do have it digitally. So if you go to our website, scgov.net/be prepared, there is a link digitally, so you can download it and access it today.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, and have a great day. And We're going to get this information out. Hopefully we can have you back on again sometime.
That sounds great. Thank you so much, Don. I appreciate you having me on today.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
This is John Rawlings with WKDW Radio saying thanks and have a good day. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye now.